It's time for the Volquest Mailbag Podcast, answering your questions from the General's quarters every week, right here on Volquest.
Good Thursday, everyone. Welcome to the Volquest.com Mailbag Podcast, presented by our friends at Smoky Mountain Organics, East Tennessee's most trusted health and wellness store, focusing on natural products and organic remedies to a variety of ailments. 4 locations to serve you, 3 in Sevier County, 1 in Knoxville, that one in Knoxville, just down from Westtown Mall, across the street from Trader Joe's. And, of course, they have locations in Gatlinburg, Pigeon Forge, and Sevierville. And you can always shop them online at SmokyMountainOrganics.com. With Rob Lewis and Austin Price, I'm Brent Hubbs. Glad to have you along with us on this game day Thursday. Tennessee to open NCAA play later today against Longwood as the Volunteers start their NCAA journey. And they will start at Rob Lewis with news on the coaching front, which leads us into our first question. Michael Schwartz has been named officially the head coach at East Carolina. He will be with this basketball team until its season is over. But a lot of people are wanting to know more about the name Greg Polinsky, who you mentioned in the chat on Monday night as a possibility for Michael Schwartz's replacement. And Artful Dodger 7 wants to know, what's his role been with the team, and can you give a little more background on who Greg is?
I mean, he's been a volunteer analyst, which basically means he's been a sounding board. It's not a paid position. He works, helps with scouting, watches a lot of film with kids. I mean, he has a long, almost 2-decade track record in the NBA, doing a lot of stuff. Director of player personnel for the Pistons. Worked in the Brooklyn organization for a long time. He was a director of college scouting. Knows, and he's one of those basketball lifers that knows just a ton of people on, across different levels. But his role has basically been an assistant coach without the title, and without working with players on the floor and without a paycheck. Is the biggest distinction. And him and Rick have known each other for years and years and years. He actually took Rick's place on Wimp Sanderson's staff back in like the early 80s. And so they have a track record going back that far. Prior to getting into the NBA, he was a head coach at Georgia Southern, assistant coach at Alabama, at Texas, but for not under Rick, but he did work at Texas. And, he's a guy that I think Rick, brought him in with the thought that Mike Schwartz was not going to be an assistant coach very longer, and already has, kind of an in-house replacement. Now, it's not official. Something could happen. Somebody could end up without a job that Rick loves, that, he wants to bring in. But right now, if I had to put money on it, I would guess that he's promoting from within.
Michael Schwartz's departure, how significant is that for Tennessee? What is Schwartz meant to Tennessee for the last few years?
I think he's a huge part of the success that they've had. First and foremost, he's a guy that the head coach really trusts and respects. I mean, he's a guy that, if Mike says something, if Mike has an idea, it's going to be something that Rick takes seriously. He may not do it, but he's going to listen and mull it over. And I mean, he's a big time X's and O's guys. I don't pretend to be an X and O expert just in talking with him and talking to former players. Talking to Coach Barnes, he's somebody that has really been instrumental in developing what they do, especially on defense. Huge. I mean, they rotate scouts. Don't get me wrong. The assistant coaches take turns and getting ready for opponents. But as far as implementing a philosophy of what Tennessee's about, Mike's fingerprints are all over that. And I could not be less surprised that he's getting an opportunity to be a head coach.
What's this say, Rob, about Rick? I mean, Rick just continues to churn out guys that move on to be head coaches. I mean, you had Ogden when he first got here. Then you obviously had Rob Lanier. You look at Dez. You look at
Kim English.
Now, I mean, like it is like a constant turnover of guys getting promoted to being head coaches. Like that's got to be a real feather in Rick's cap when he does go to hire anybody. Really.
Oh, I think it's huge. I mean, you're talking about. He's been here 7 years. He's had 5 guys leave his staff. Nobody left to be an assistant coach somewhere else. Everybody left to be a head coach running their own program. And, that's a testament, not just to Rick's reputation in college athletics, but also in how he lets his guys coach. I mean, he doesn't micromanage them. I know Des Oliver told me after he got the ETSU job that, he was still, it was different. He was learning things every day, but he was like, I feel so lucky, to have worked for Rick. I really feel like I'm prepared to do this with the way. I mean, Rick lets guys, assistant coaches, handle interviews at times. Like his weekly, Monday press conference. Sometimes, I mean, there aren't a lot of coaches out there that are secure enough to do that. That would let somebody else speak for them, speak for their program. And he's got no problems with it. Now part of it is because Hubs being he's bored and doesn't want to do it, but at the same time, at the same time, a lot of coaches would rather do something besides their media, but they'd be too insecure
Right.
to let an assistant go and take that role.
Yeah, I mean, I think the thing about it is he doesn't lock his assistants in the office and say, watch film, and that's all you do. You go to practice, his guys run practice. He's obviously in charge of practice, but they're very hands-on and what they get to do. And he actually lets them coach in practice when they scrimmage stuff up a lot of times. And, I think the reputation of the fact that he lets those guys and ADs around the country know that they're getting legitimate on-the-job training and preparation for the job, make his coaches more attractive candidates. And again, if Rick Barnes calls and says a guy's ready, it's going to carry weight. I mean, that's what happened at ETSU with Des Oliver. It certainly happened with Kim English as well. When their ADs called and asked, he said, yeah, he's ready. And I think that's certainly been the case with Michael Schwartz as well. And, I think Michael Schwartz got a challenging job. I think there's some challenges to East Carolina, but we'll see what he can do in terms of recruiting, particularly overseas. I think he'll have a foreign flair to that team early on because of some ties he has there. And we'll see what he can put together. Obviously, John Gilbert knows him and knows Rick Barnes, and that was part of the tie as well. But Rob, you and I have talked about this. Mike Schwartz was going to be a head coach somewhere next year. You've had that feeling for several months. Not that he was angry, looking to leave, mad at anybody, but he believes he's ready to be a head coach and was looking for what opportunity.
He's been really close a time or two, like really close. Last 2 or 3 candidates, and actually has turned down at least one job that I know of, just given the some circumstances around it.
All right, Vol and SC had a couple of questions about assistant coaches we've addressed. He also wants to know, who do you think will be back next season for this basketball team? And I don't know about young guys transferring, but I think he's probably asking, where's Kennedy Chandler?
John Fulkerson's coming back again.
Where some people try to talk about Vescovi, maybe looking at the something overseas. Where do you think some of those guys are, and has that crossed anybody's mind over the last 2 months, given the way this season has gone, Rob?
I mean, kids leave all the time, so I'm not going to say nobody's leaving, but right now, this is not one of those situations where, like last year, I had a really good idea there were going to be several guys, at this time in March, this week in March, a very good idea of several guys who weren't coming back. And I've got nobody like that this year, other than Kennedy, who, and that's not about a transfer. That's about whether or not he's a guaranteed first round draft pick. So
if he plays this week and the next 2 weeks like he did in Tampa, Rob, it's going to be really hard for him to even look at anything other than going, right?
I think it feels to me like it's trending in that direction. But I will say, he comes from a great family. They're not going to just jump to jump. I mean, they're going to have some respected people. And again, we go back to Rick Barnes. There's no better resource to have when you're making that kind of decision than Rick Barnes with the guys that he knows in the league and has had relationships with for decades.
If Kennedy goes, Rob, do we expect Rick to go into the transfer portal to get Zakai, especially depending on what happens with Vescovi, as Brent alluded to? Do we expect him to go transfer portal wise there, or second signing period?
I just wouldn't rule it out. I'll be stunned if they bring in another high school guy. But I mean, you got BJ coming in, BJ Edwards. You'll have Sakai, and with Santiago, I've not heard that. I'm not saying.
Well, I haven't heard it either. Just people have wondered aloud about it on message boards and things like that. I've not heard it at all.
He seems very happy here.
Yeah, and it's not like, I don't know exactly what Vescovi's family situation is, but I don't get the impression that he needs to go buy his mom a house,
right,
and play in Spain next year. I mean, his parents travel up here a couple times a year, which is not cheap, coming from Uruguay to America. So, and like AP said, I think he's really happy. Maybe he wants to go be a professional, but
Doesn't feel
I
like
have
it.
not heard. I've not heard those rumblings.
Yeah. Can you peel the curtain back? I don't know if you can. If you can't, I don't want you to put words in anybody's mouth. There was so much talk early on about Kennedy and just, Rick was so hard on him and maybe that relationship didn't look like it was, going swimmingly. I know Kennedy said he wanted to be Coach Hard, but maybe it was a little harder than he thought it was going to be in December. Can you talk a little bit how those two have grown throughout the season in terms of the player coach relationship? Is it different, a lot different now than it was in December, Rob? Or is this just simply the process of a guy developing under Rick Barnes and it's the same as it was in December as it is now?
I mean, Kennedy probably is happier than he was in December, but one person in that relationship has not changed. And one person had, and not that Kennedy, I don't think Kennedy was ever resistant or anything like that. But like you said, I think it was harder than he thought it would be. He'd been to some practices and seen Rick get hot and yell and, make some kids feel bad probably. But I think the grind of having it happen to him for, 2 or 3 months, I don't want to say Rick broke him down. That's too hard. I just think he finally got used to it and really got to it. And I think Josiah helped him with this a bunch. I really do. I think he just finally got used to it. It's not personal. This is how he is all the time. When practice is over, we're watching film or whatever. It's, the coach flips a switch. And I think that Rick got to the point where he really respected Kennedy a lot more. Felt like, and not that he didn't, I think he treats him like a grown-up
right
now more so, whereas he was coaching him like he was a high school kid. I think he's coached a lot of that out of him. And I think Kennedy gets, how, I don't want to say serious necessarily, but Kennedy knows how to work. He knows what is important, that when Rick is harping on him for some little thing, that there's a reason for it. I think the Kentucky game was a big part of it. I think Kennedy was embarrassed.
Yeah, I'm sure he
that
was.
game.
I mean, I think he had two moments, the Kentucky moment and obviously the Texas moment and not being on the floor at the end there. All right, a couple of football questions. We'll jump back into some hoops here in just a second as well. Any smoke to Eric Gray returning to Tennessee, AP, and what's the latest on Brew McCoy?
Eric Gray is a member of the Oklahoma football team. Now, he has already transferred, but any player can transfer and then they can graduate transfer. If Eric Gray were to be a graduate after May, then he could grad transfer anywhere. There's smoke out there a lot about everybody. Okay, like that's not like there's smoke about Eric Gray 2 months ago. There's smoke about several players that are on Tennessee's team that could potentially go elsewhere, and they never do. So I think a lot of it depends on what Eric Gray does this spring. If he becomes more of a factor than he was a year ago, we know what he was a year ago. And then Tennessee really does like this Ulysses Bentley kid from SMU. They like him a lot. Now, can they get him? Transfers are tricky. I mean, a lot of times they kind of know where they're going before they go in. And so does he have a place, or did he go in just because he wanted to see what was going to come after him? And if that's the case, then yeah, Tennessee, I think, would love to be in play with Ulysses Bentley. And then with Brew McCoy, Tennessee and Brew McCoy continue to have conversations. USC's trying hard to get him to stay at USC. And, if Brew's going to be here, he'll be here in May.
Yeah, and the running back, the need at the running back position from a transfer standpoint could change a little bit based on what goes on with spring practice. Maybe it doesn't, but that's something to factor in there.
That's right.
Well. Megavol 98. Last year we saw players such as Jeremy Banks, Theo Jackson step up, become impact players on defense. Who are two players you could see making a similar jump in their development to help improve the defense going into next season? Rob, you jump in here with any of that as well. You saw this team and know about this football team as well. So defensive guys, I think Byron Young is going to continue to take another step for Tennessee. And I think DJ Terry, two guys along the defensive line that I think Terry's going to be asked to do a lot with the departure of Matthew Butler. And I think he's a guy who got better as the season went on at the end of the year. So those would be two. Now they're both defensive linemen, but that would be two guys for me. They got to be a secondary guy somewhere.
I'm gonna stay on the defensive line, and I want to take Rob's guy, Bryson Eason, to take a step this spring. much like Rob was alluding to Coach Barnes coaching some things out of Kennedy Chandler. I think Coach Garner has coached some things out of and into Bryson Eason, who again played linebacker in high school and is just now learning to play. He all of a sudden had his hand on the ground. Now he's got his hand on the ground. He's inside. I mean, like big difference between playing middle linebacker and defensive tackle in the SEC. And then, I go into the secondary. I mean, I'm going to go, Desmond Williams, because Tennessee has to have help this spring. They're really thin at corner. He's going to get a ton of opportunities, and if he can play at all, he may play himself right into a starting spot in the fall.
What about Elijah Simmons? I'm not saying he is. I'm asking you guys.
Could be, yeah.
He's ready to take the step.
I think
he's a guy that we talk about every
They just
summer.
need somebody to step up on the defensive line, whether it's Terry or Eason or Elijah Simmons. I mean, one of the three.
I'll say this about Simmons. Simmons has had a really good winter, and his focus has been he's not been a high school guy. He's been much more of a professional type guy this winter. Now, can he consistently do that between now and August? We'll see. If he can, then he's going to be a guy who makes a huge addition to this defensive line, because we all know he has talent. It's just a matter of whether or not he can manage his weight. He can stay focused the way he needs to. But I've been told by multiple people that he has been much better this offseason than he has any other offseason since he's been here. So maybe his time has arrived. We'll have to wait and see there. I think Christian Charles too, Rob, is the other guy in the secondary, but because of what he did last year. He's smart, he's heady, good football player. He's going to have to factor in and help the secondary that needs to be, is going to need to be revamped and needs to get faster, as we've talked about for a year now.
And with the corner, seeming like some holes or question marks there, is Turnage stay at nickel? Does he get a look?
Well, he's going to miss spring practice because of that surgery. He's going to have to work outside at corner, in my opinion. I mean, he can play nickel and might be your nickel guy, but you got to find your two corners as well. And I don't know exactly who those guys are going to be. So I think Turnage is a guy who's going to be able to play both, are going to have to play both. I think they're going to look at Slaughter some at corner this spring to see how that works. And we'll see what kind of magic Willie Martinez can pull off, particularly this spring with a bunch of guys out. Going to miss a lot of valuable reps at the corner position. Back to hoops we go. Can the Vols handle Michigan's size with three of the five starters being above 6'8", and will they be able to play that small ball lineup if they get to Tennessee and Michigan on Saturday, Rob?
I think there's been a lot of people able to handle Michigan's size. So, yeah,
14 teams, in fact.
They're good. I get what the guy's saying, and I'm not trying to belittle it, but I don't worry about Tennessee playing against big teams defensively. I worry about Tennessee getting absolutely no inside scoring against some teams, and that can come from penetration, from Josiah in the mid range, come from a lot of different spots. But matching up and guarding big teams, that doesn't concern me about this team. I mean, you're not going to get any bigger than Arizona. I mean, I know that was one game, but that's elite size, and Tennessee matched up with them. Yeah, that was at home, and again, small sample size. But no, I don't worry about Tennessee guarding anybody.
My dream scenario, Rob, Tennessee's got about a 10 or 12 point lead with about 30 seconds to go, and Rick calls a timeout to put all the subs in. What a troll move, man. Of course, this is coming from the guy that loves to tweet out pictures of road signs. So
in fact, I can't. I've only heard half of what you said in this podcast because of the Pacific Ocean roaring in the background.
That's Long Beach, Rob. That's Long Beach.
It is a nice view you got from Pebble Beach there, Austin. Hopefully you'll come back and join us at some point in time in the Southeast. But we'll see. Hey, Charlie Work wants to know about Joe Lunardi talking about conference tournaments, talking about the fact that Kentucky was playing for a 1 seed on Saturday. They lose the game, but Tennessee doesn't help themselves. His question is simple. After his paragraph leading into it is, why can't they have a fair, transparent process that takes the entire season, including the conference tournaments, into account? Is it really that hard to do?
Asking the wrong person here. I mean, I thought it was pathetic. And again, I think me and you, Hubbard, both said the same thing. I don't think there's a big difference between the 2 or the 3 seed, but it's just the principle of the thing. And Lunardi talked out both sides of his mouth all weekend long, not only the Kentucky thing, but then on Sunday, he went on national television and said in regards to Tennessee and Kentucky and Auburn being 2 seeds, Tennessee being a 3. Head-to-head doesn't matter. Then I saw him talking out the other side of his mouth when somebody was talking about Tennessee being a 3 seed and Villanova being a 2. He's like, well, Villanova beat about 18 in November. Well, why that's head-to-head. Why are you bringing that up? So I've got nothing for you. A 2 or 3 seed, it doesn't matter. But the way they clearly were lying this week because they did not take Tennessee's 3 days in Tampa into account. I mean, how did Tennessee doesn't help itself? Auburn and Kentucky don't hurt themselves, and it's obvious.
What do we make of Buzz Williams and his 8-minute thing, and then he handed out his thesis statement there to all the media?
I got up and walked out. True story. I was amazed.
I mean,
I like Buzz Williams. I'm a fan. I thought he was just a little over the top there.
No, I loved it. I mean, I loved it from the standpoint of I didn't think in his deal following their NIT win, I didn't think he took any personal jabs. I thought, I mean, it was long. I get that, but he was just asking the questions everybody else asked, and he had his research to back it up. I kind of thought it was. I was kind of impressed with it. Probably a little long, but overall, I mean, it wasn't just some kind of crazy rant or Twitter deal. I mean, there was a lot of thought put into it, and gave out all his research, and maybe I appreciated it because I agree with him. I think his basketball team should have been in the tournament, and I think he had the facts to back that up. But I actually thought he handled it pretty well, other than it was a little bit long overall. But I think that team should have been in if you factor in conference tournament play, but they didn't, and they didn't make it, Rob.
I had no problem with Texas A&M not making it. Now, they played well, they got hot, but they took February off. I mean, they lost 8 in a row. They lost to Missouri, they lost to South Carolina, lost at Vanderbilt, and I mean, I like Buzz. If they would have gotten in, I had no problem, none whatsoever.
But you don't think it's a gross overslide?
I think they were easy to leave out because they lost 8 in a row, and it wasn't exactly a murderer's row there. They lost to Konzo. They lost to 2 coaches that got fired.
Fair,
an 8-game losing streak.
And I think this discussion, Austin, is kind of what you deal with when you talk about the committee. And I think this is what you have. That's the unknown, is you don't know what people are really weighing in or not weighing in. Strength of schedule.
Well, I mean, his point was I know our detriment was the losing streak, but shouldn't our winning streak counter that?
Yeah,
and what
again,
they did.
You get a group of guys in the room making that decision, and that's fine. My problem with everything in the committee is this: 1, you don't know what they're factoring in, and 2, they have come out and made it clear that the last weekend before the NCAA tournament doesn't matter. And to me, that's the biggest detriment, because other than playing your way in by getting an automatic bid, it feels like it's very hard to get an at-large bid by playing well in the conference tournament, because they basically said the conference tournament doesn't count. That's
unless you're in the Big Ten and you're Indiana.
I mean, and that's my thing, is you're sitting here, does quad 1 factor? What are the analytics that factor? And then from the human element standpoint, what are you really looking at? And I don't think any of us know the answer to that question. And I think that's where Buzz Williams is. I think that's where Tennessee is. I think that's where a lot of people around the country are, in trying to figure out what's important and what's not when it comes to scheduling and all those things as well. Nashville 615, is Josiah playing himself into a draftable player at some point? We've already talked about Kennedy Chandler and the possibility of him returning or not returning. This basketball team is shaping up to be really good next year too. Your thoughts, quickly?
I've always thought that Josiah had a chance to play the league. Now, whether or not that's as a draft, whether or not he gets drafted or works his way in, I don't know. But my thing is, I think he could do the same thing for an NBA team that he does now. He probably wouldn't score as much, but I think he could, maybe be an end of the rotation guy. Maybe he doesn't even play the rotation, but he's such a good character guy that he's one of those dudes that can hang around just because he's a good guy to have on the team. But I think he could guard 3 or 4 positions in the NBA. I think he can score 6 or 8 points a game and grab a few rebounds and just be a glue guy, which I think he would be a role player at the NBA level and I think he'll have a chance.
All right, let's finish this podcast mailbag out with some football recruiting questions, a couple of football questions here. Anthron wants to know, AP, how is your business trip disguised as a family vacation in California going? Depending on this quarterback class, how realistic are Carnell Tate and Kyler Casper, since they will both be here in early April?
It was a family trip. I mean, like, no one wants to believe that. It was a family trip. Go look at my Facebook. I've got a 4-minute video of my kids at Disneyland. Not to mention other pictures from San Diego and LA and everywhere else. I think that how the quarterback decisions go will impact a guy like Carnell Tate. Carnell Tate talks to Dante Moore a lot. He talks to Nico a lot. That to me is one that I don't know how much it really impacts Kyler Casper. But Casper's going to come in the same weekend as Carnell Tate and Nico at the, for that, the spring scrimmage there. And so, obviously Tennessee's got a chance to have a big weekend that weekend. And, depending on, Nico's decision, then you could have a guy that's trying to recruit those two, to join him potentially here. So, I think that, if you could get one of the two, I think you'd be running to the bank happy with that and start building around it, because you've got, guys like Caleb Herring, that are highly ranked that are going to be a part of this class as well.
All right. With Nico returning to campus in April, how much does that help get him in the boat? If he ends up in his class, what ranking could we be looking at? 2 questions there.
Well, I think Nico's going to decide before that visit in April. And then, I think a lot of that depends on, how much sway he has. It's pretty clear that, he talks to several, prospects out there. If he's able to, have some pull, then, you're looking at Tennessee, to me, it's a locked in top 10 class, because you'll have some natural built-in ones like I just talked about with Caleb Herring, maybe potentially Bryson Sanders and so on and so forth, that have a good ranking to them. And then, you've already, started the class really solid with Ethan Davis and Jack Luttrell. So, I think that you're locked in top 10. You can only build from there.
Another one on Nico. I have not seen all of his tape, but a lot of his highlights are of him running. So is Nico considered more of a running quarterback or an athlete playing quarterback, or does he also have the arm talent to be a high-level pocket passer as well?
Well, I think Nico is a pocket passer who can run.
And it's not
you're talking about that
running.
Highlight. No, if you're talking about that one, it's because he leads the one highlight video that he put on his Instagram or whatever with 3 runs. But then you start looking at some of the throws he makes. Kid's got quite an arm on him, and he's only going to get better. Like, the guy that leads the team down in Alabama, thinks he has more upside than any quarterback in this class. So I think that says a lot about, the thought process of many about Nico.
And then last 2 questions here. What's everyone's bracket saying for the Vols? How far do you have them going? I have them winning it all, because I told myself I would pick them if they win a conference tournament. Rob, where do you think this team? Where do you pigeonhole them a little bit right now? Not an absolute.
I hope people don't get upset with me. I have them going out in the Elite Eight. I don't think they beat Arizona twice.
Okay.
I do think they get revenge over Villanova.
All right. AP, where you got them at?
To be honest with you, I've not even examined it at all. I've been in theme parks for the last several days. So, I know where Tennessee's at. I know who they kind of have in front of them, but I've not examined like who those teams play. Like, what does Villanova's path look like to get to Tennessee? What does Arizona's path look like to get to potentially match up with Tennessee? I know what Tennessee has to do the first few rounds, but I honestly haven't examined it enough to give you a real answer.
Yeah, my thing is, I think they're going to get to San Antonio, and I think when you get there, you got really good teams, and it could be an absolute crapshoot. I think it would be hard to beat Arizona twice if Arizona's there, just because Fulkerson played so well in that Arizona game. Could you get a repeat performance from him there? I don't know. Could you match up inside the way that you need to, Rob? I think that's a question mark.
Yeah, and one of Arizona's big guys, Tubelis, who was a really good player, was spent all day at Knoxville in foul trouble. And Fulke played out of his mind, which we haven't seen since.
I mean, you think about it, Konzo's run that year ended in Indianapolis. You've got last year, which was such a debacle that was in Indianapolis. Then you had Bruce's year that ended in San Antonio, one of these same locations where there's bad memories and bad juju. But you never know, Hubs. You just never know.
No, and it starts tomorrow afternoon against Longwood. We'll see how Tennessee goes. Last question. We're out the door here. Any more reports on anyone who physically looks ready to go this spring from the freshman, not named Justin Williams? Give me a freshman physically that you hear that you like.
Well, I can hear good things about Elijah Herring, and then I think Addison Nichols, from a size standpoint, will be somebody that can. I'm not saying be a starter, but I think can get some solid work in this spring.
I think those young receivers are all going to create a bunch of buzz this spring, but we're not going to know if it's real buzz or not real buzz because of all the injuries Tennessee's dealing with at the cornerback position. But I think you're going to hear a lot of talk about these young receivers because I think there's going to be opportunities galore going against the secondary that's going to be depleted with a lot of injuries in the cornerback position. But Chaz Nimrod's a guy with size that people have talked a little bit about heading into spring practice. So we'll see where he is at the end of spring practice. All right, that's going to do it for this edition of the Volquest.com Mailbag Podcast presented by our friends at Smoky Mountain Organics. For Rob Lewis, who will have all of your hoops coverage coming up for you later today. I already got some up now, but more hoops coverage coming up later today. And Austin Price, whose sun kissed? Your tan looks pretty good, AP. I'll give you credit.
Hubs, this is how we do. For Rob Lewis, we'll have everything with Longwood covered. Austin Price, we'll have everything with Long Beach covered. This has been the Volquest.com podcast sponsored by Smoky Mountain Organics.
You've been listening to the Volquest Mailbag Podcast every week right here on Volquest.